Every time I sit down to write this, I wind up sitting here sobbing for hours. Do you know what it feels like to lose a parent? Do you know what it feels like to lose a parent to senseless violence?
The vehicle is passing 3rd Avenue. Speeds are 100 miles an hour.
Almost every night, the same nightmare plays on repeat. I get a phone call around 9 at night. We think your dad is missing. Seconds turn to minutes, turns to hours. My entire family looking to me for answers, and I have none. But I still hold hope that they'll find him alive. 3 a.m. My phone rings. They found him. Dead.
Rescue response, driver appears unconscious.
She's a murder suspect out of North Carolina.
I certainly never thought she would murder him. I wouldn't learn where until about a week later, where they found him, how they found him. My father was taken from me. I can't call him just to talk anymore, but I'm lucky. The last thing I said to him was, "Bye, Dad. I love you."
That picture. That sums up Uncle Jim. This is about when he stepped in to help my mom with us when my dad stepped out. And this is, around the times that my mom tells those funny stories about coming home and Uncle Jim trying to change baby diapers with clothespin on his nose. He was more than an uncle to me. He was a father figure to me. He gave up part of his life to help my mother raise my sister and I. She was a single mom of twin girls, and he gladly helped her raise us. He was the uncle that took me every summer and let me go lobstering with him and took me fishing and just make my summer. I very, very, very much looked forward to Uncle Jim coming to North Carolina, but I was definitely a little disappointed in where he bought a home, despite that being a brand new subdivision. If you went further down the road, there was a lot of rundown trailers and drugs and things like that. There's a corner store. You could probably go to the corner of Uncle Jim's backyard and throw something and hit the store. It was that close. And like most corner stores in rural North Carolina, this one really didn't attract the best crowds because they would gather around the slot machines and hang out in there constantly. The concern was not him getting in trouble with all of these people. My concern was something bad was going to happen to him in that area. I kept my concerns about Uncle Jim buying a house in that neighborhood to myself because at that point, what was I going to do? He already bought the house. So, it was just like, let him be happy. And he'll find out on his own and it'll be over. But no one thinks it's going to be over in the manner it was over for him.
Billy, it's your dad. I love you. I just wanted to talk to you, so give me a call for a change of pace. All right? I'll have to come all the way home to kick your ass. All right, love you. Bye.
That's my dad. I miss him a lot. And hearing his voice helps that. When all of this was happening with my dad, I went by Kellyanne. In 2020, I changed my name to Roman. I figured out that I am trans. And so I've started to live my truth. So my dad, he was just the best thing since sliced bread to me. My dad was a kind and loving man. He really just wanted everybody to be happy and well taken care of. I grew up with my mom. My dad and her split up, and he moved to Nantucket. So on the weekends when I was younger, I would go to Nantucket and we would go out on the boat. He was a lobsterman and a fisherman for most of his life. My dad was very, very handsome, and he was a ladies' man. He's a very free spirit, so feeling tied down in a relationship is not exactly, when he was younger, what he wanted. I think that as he got older, he wanted to settle down. He was slowing down as far as his health and stuff goes, so I think he wanted just a companion, a life companion. I think I was scared more than he was about the surgery. It was very, very nerve-wracking. I did something I don't usually do, which is I prayed. And I don't do that, but I did at that point. When the doctors came in and said everything went well, it was a huge weight lifted off. It kind of gave me a new outlook on life, his surgery, just because in a blink of an eye, it can all be taken away. So, after his surgery, he was on the up and up. He wanted a fresh start. And he found that in North Carolina, mostly because my cousin Victoria was down here and she loved it. The years after he moved to North Carolina were a little tumultuous for our relationship. I felt almost like he was abandoning me because he was so far away. And I definitely wish I had been better about keeping in contact with him. I just wish he was still here.
In the morning, we walk into our meeting room and the captain's going over the daily reports that came from the night prior, and the Pennoni case came up. What stood out to me about the James Pennoni case is the way the case came to us, the way that the family called. He was a missing person. They haven't talked to him in several days. When the family called, their concern was that he had recently had open heart surgery, and they were trying to see if law enforcement could find him. When the original call came out, the deputy was responding to what's called a wellness check. The deputy knocked on the doors, he checked the windows. He didn't see any signs of anybody in the house. He tried to call Mr. Pennoni. No one answered. There was no vehicle in the driveway. There was no signs that someone had been there in the last couple of days. They basically told them the vehicle was there overnight. When deputies ran the plates, that's when they found that it was registered to Mr. Pennoni. And then they connected the dots with Mr. Pennoni's missing person report. That is when the case was sent up to detectives for further investigation. I mean, no one just leaves their vehicle parked in an alleyway or in between two trailers and walks off. In a case like this, every minute counts. So we were already behind, and we needed to move to find One, why was his truck there? Two, where is he at? We couldn't drag our feet. I felt that Mr. Benoni was hurt, killed. Just now it's by who, by what, where, when, where is his body if he was?
When I first saw this house, I thought, how amazing. Look what you got for yourself, this beautiful new home. And now when I see this house, it gives me knots in my stomach. Like to me, it looks like the house of horrors. They met when he was playing the slot machine at the convenience store right next door to his house. And that's when most of us didn't hear much from Uncle Jim anymore. I did hear that he told my mom that he was very excited because she was a pretty woman. She was smaller in stature, had long, beautiful hair, and he was really excited that someone was paying attention. When Uncle Jim met Sandra, he kind of just shut off on everyone. Well, we figured, hey, he met a woman and, he's living his own life. He's got his new home. He's got a girlfriend. Let's let him do his own thing, My mom called me and she was just panicked. She was telling me that she couldn't get a hold of my Uncle Jim. She's like, please, can you just drive there? Can you go check on him? I feel like something's wrong. I was picturing him either hurt or sick inside of his house. Has he had a heart attack? I dropped everything I was doing and just head straight to Uncle Jim's house. I pull up on scene and I, hop out and the deputy's like, who are you? I was like, well, I'm his niece. I'm, his family member that lives in North Carolina. And they're like, do you have a key to the house? And I was like, no, actually I don't. And I don't know why I don't, but I don't. He was like, well, basically there's nothing I can do for them. I asked the deputy all these questions. He did have a bypass. What if he's laying on the floor? And, he explained to me the difference between entering for a well-being check or, an actual medical situation. It was extremely frustrating to me that we could not forcibly enter the home. And then he just randomly brought up this flower garden. He's like, oh yeah, I noticed it looks like he just recently started a flower garden in the backyard. And I was like, what are you talking about, this flower garden? His backyard is like a half acre of dirt. He would never just plant a flower garden on dirt. And then I started thinking about it and I was like, oh gosh. I was like, that is just like a terrible sign. Your heart is just racing, takes your breath away a little bit. It's almost like you could just jump out of your own body. If it was up to me, I would have grabbed a shovel and dug up that garden myself. I just knew. I called my mom and I told her, I said, I think he's gone. You just feel like someone's just gone. They're no longer here.
We were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I got the call from my cousin Danny. And he basically was just like, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. But your dad, we think, is missing. And at that point, my heart, dropped completely. I started panicking. I didn't know what to do. I mean, how do you process that? I was trying to use social media, which was how we communicated most to get in touch with him. I also was calling his cell phone number, just kept going to voicemail. I knew something was not okay. The fact that he wasn't answering multiple phone calls from myself was very alarming.
At this point in the investigation, I'm still up in the air on whether Mr. Pannoni is just not wanting to talk to family, just out doing his own thing. I mean, he's 61 years old. He doesn't have to check in with anybody. So at this point, it was just whether or not Mr. Pannoni is where he wants to be or not. When I go back to my desk, I'm looking at the photos of Mr. Pannoni's truck. One of the windows was rolled down and the keys were in the ignition. There were lumps of hair found throughout the car. It looked like someone got into a fight and the hair was pulled out. After reading the reports, looking at the pictures, it just did not sit well with me. Who was in the truck with Mr. Pannoni? What happened to the person? Why is there these chunks of hair in the car? I needed it to tell a story and it just was not lining up right now. The first place we went to was to speak with the girlfriend. She had told the deputies that night that she hadn't seen him in a couple of days. But I needed to know more than just when the last time she saw him. I needed to know, what their relationship was like. Was it rocky? Were they in good standings? Now we need to hear it from her, what was actually going on. We drove to Jones County where Miss Wagner lives. I asked her if we can go inside the house to talk. And while we're in the house, I began to ask her questions about Mr. Pannoni. I could see that she's getting upset because of the way I'm asking questions in regard to her relationship. So I asked her about her hair. I said, we found a lot of hair in Mr. Pannoni's truck. And that's when Miss Wagner said, I put Mr. Pannoni's truck in the trailer park. And she said, Mr. Pannoni told me to put it there. He was running away from law enforcement because he was in a car accident in Swansboro. And he was drinking and left the scene. He didn't want to get arrested. Mr. Pannoni wanted to get rid of his vehicle, change his name so that he wouldn't be arrested by law enforcement for the accident that he did in Swansboro. And I'm like, okay, well, where was Mr. Pannoni when you put the truck there? And she said he was at home. But at this point, she didn't know where he was. What did you do with Mr. Pannoni was in my head. Everything that she said during the interview, it makes me believe she's lying to me. But I wanted her to feel like I believed what she was saying. I wanted her to feel comfortable enough to continue talking to us. We had no body, we had no crime scene, we had nothing. We needed more. I felt that Sandra was either responsible or involved in Mr. Pannoni's disappearance.
She looked like she had lived a decently hard life. I think he saw someone he could help in the beginning. And I think that he wanted to be like a knight in shining armor. And he tried. It was a couple of months into it, and there were some red flags that I had seen and heard. He had once told me that she had wiped his bank account and that she had struggled with drugs. That was when I really started harping on him about separating from her. He was very insistent that she had changed her ways, that she was on the right path now, and I wasn't so sure. I called him for his birthday in March, and he told me that he was separated and was very much so doing his own thing. I believed that she was completely out of the picture. That's what he led me to believe. That was the last time I talked to him. It was on his birthday. And I was lucky because I got to tell him that I loved him.
I called my mother when I was leaving Uncle Jim's house. My mom sounded distraught. She was anxious. She wasn't tearful yet. She was mad. And I know it's because she wanted answers. She wanted to know where her brother was, and she was irate with this woman. My mom stayed in touch a lot via social media messenger, and she had been sending messages to his account, and the messages were getting shorter. The language wasn't like his, and she said, I think that it's this woman using his phone sending me messages. This is not him. At this point, she was calling out Sandra. Sandra, I know this is you. What have you done to my brother? And then my uncle's social media was logged off. She said, something's happened. I just know it.
When I left Sandra Wagner's house, I was very suspicious of her. She stated that the accident that Mr. Pannoni was in happened in the next town over. I knew my next steps would be to make contact with a law enforcement officer in that town to see if we can verify that the accident actually happened and there was a report taken. The victim stated that he was hit by the same vehicle that Mr. Pannoni drove, but that the vehicle fled and he identified the driver as a female instead of a male. It made me believe that the only reason Ms. Wagner knew about the accident is because she was the driver and she's the one who fled. And the reason why she fled is because she didn't want to have any contact with law enforcement. I needed to find out what she did with Mr. Pannoni. The next step is searching Mr. Pannoni's house. Once we obtained the search warrant, we headed out there with CSI investigators. Honestly, I was hoping to find Mr. Pannoni in one of the bedrooms. I was hoping that he may have passed of old age, but that is not what we found. Walking into the house, I noticed that it was well maintained. It was cleaned. I hate to say it, for a 61-year-old male, it was very clean. When I walked into the bathroom, I smelled bleach, as if someone had cleaned it. He had a cloth shower curtain, and behind it wasn't the plastic. No one lives like that. You're going to put the plastic on to prevent the water from coming out. My automatic thought process was he's probably wrapped up in it somewhere. I can't 100% say, but that was what was going through my head. It being super clean suggests that someone cleaned it and got rid of all the evidence, everything that would have been needed to tell us what happened to Mr. Pannoni. there was no signs that we could see of an altercation happening there or anybody being stabbed or shot. There was nothing. They did Mr. Pannoni's room. They did the second bedroom to the right, but it was the third bedroom to the left that when they went in and they did the luminol, that it showed that there was blood on the bed frame and on the floor. Lit up where the potential for blood to have been. It is very apparent that Mr. Pannoni was killed there. At this time, I'm standing outside talking to my supervisors about the information we got. And as we're walking to the back of the house, we noticed that there was a flower bed. Brand new mulch, border, no weeds. My hair was standing on the back of my neck. And my supervisor starts pulling at the flower bed. Everything came up. All the flowers were still in the plastic pots that they come in. While they're digging in the flower bed, they were able to see plastic. And as they got closer, they did smell bleach. And so they continued, and once they did unearth the body that was there, were able to confirm it was Mr. Pannoni. And yes, he was in fact wrapped in the shower curtains. Now we know where he was killed. We need to know by who.
It was 3 a.m. when Detective Flores called me. Her voice was shaking a lot, and I just kind of knew that something was wrong. She told me where they found him, right outside the back door to his house, buried underneath a freshly planted garden of pansies. I don't even remember hanging up the phone, to be quite honest. I just remember running across the hall to my mom's room and kind of diving in bed with her. Just a mess. It definitely felt like a nightmare. It was more of a night terror. I thought at any moment I would wake up and it would be fine, everything would be normal, and Dad would still be alive, and it wasn't the case.
Pannoni was stabbed around 4 times in the heart. It looked like they attempted to dismember him by sawing through his elbow. Seeing that would indicate rage. Someone enraged stabbed him multiple times. Indicates someone who's in close connection with him. At this point, the prime suspect was Sandra Wagner. Because of the news being out there that Mr. Pannoni was found, there was a lot of moving parts that we had, so we had to move quick. So the next day, I needed bank records for Mr. Pannoni so I could track down when his last purchase was. The financial records came back, and we took each purchase and went straight to the company and was able to find after March, beginning in April, there were no more purchases done by Mr. Pannoni. They were all done by Sandra Wagner. They did have surveillance. So we were able to get the time frame of the transaction and then go to the facility, and they were able to bring up the cameras for that time. And during that time, it would show Sandra Wagner alone making the purchase, and Mr. Pannoni was not there. One of the transactions were for a hardware store where she purchased 2 coolers. and then returned the coolers a couple of days after. And then I needed to also track those flower pots that we found at the site. So we photographed the flower pots and documented the UPC code that were on the flower pots. Based on the UPC code, we were able to track it back to a garden center where it was sold, where she would purchase bleach and cleaning products like that. And then, of course, the flowers, the border, the lights, the mulch that she put on the burial site. And then it shows her going to the ATM and withdrawing about $600. And then 2 days after that, she withdrew another $600. I can't prove it, but given that she did try to chop Mr. Pannoni up, I believe she may have tried to or want to use the coolers to place the body parts in there. Because of how difficult the actual plan was to perform, she stopped and had to come up with a new one. Sandra Wagner did this, and now here is the evidence showing that she was involved. And even though we don't have her actually doing the murder, this is circumstantial evidence surrounding it that would lead us to believe that she committed the murder. I needed to get Sandra back into the office and have a formal sit-down interview with her. I gave her a phone call, asked her if she would come in. She stated she wasn't going to come in until she spoke with her attorney. So we set up a time for, I believe it was 3:30 in the afternoon. 3:30 came, went. Miss Sandra didn't show up. I tried to call her a couple of times, and there was no answer. At that point in the investigation, there was a warrant issued out for her. She was a wanted individual. Not knowing where Sandra was, I felt like a disappointment. It's like, I had her, she was here, now she's running. How long is she gonna run for? How long until we actually get her behind bars and let her answer for what she did? Sandra was scared. And when you're scared, you do stupid things. And in this situation, it caused her to run from her actions. And I mean, you can only run for so long. When they found her leaving the grocery store, she took off in her vehicle and led them on a high-speed chase.
The vehicle is passing 3rd Avenue, Rossmore Circle, 3rd Avenue. Speeds are 100 miles an hour. I can't see her.
I'm lost visual.
All right, she's coming up on Columbia Highway. Somebody else take it, please. I'm too far behind.
Where she crashed into a tree.
What did you say? Can't hear you. What did you say? 10-6. Downgraded, everybody.
Rescue response, driver appears unconscious.
No, not right now.
All right, she's
All
breathing.
right, what do we got? We got breathing?
We got. All right. You got gloves? Hold on.
All right, just keep her stable. Just keep her stable.
Let me go get my phone. All right, she's coming too. She's coming too.
When I found out that she was arrested, I had so much relief because now I could tell the family we got her. Now they don't have to stay up at night worrying, is this ever gonna be finished? Are they gonna ever have closure? She's manipulated him since day one. She knew what she wanted when she got through the door. She knew what she was gonna use him for. And then eventually, when it became time that she couldn't get any more from him, she got rid of him. Working cases like this is why I got into law enforcement. I was able to help a family get through the worst time in their life. We were able to give them justice.
This is just, I mean, the first time I've seen that. But to know this is, my uncle bought this home and this is where he ended up is just heartbreaking. I mean, these are the things I try to hide from some of my family members and hope that they don't have to see, but yeah, it's very hard to look at that photo. My mom was an emotional disaster. She could not stop crying. She was a mess. The hardest feeling in the world for me is to see my mom broken like that. And that's exactly how I can describe my mom, broken. She feels like she convinced him to move here, and had he not moved here, he would still be alive. She needs to let go of all that pain. She needs to let go and understand that Uncle Jim is in a good place and it's time to enjoy her life again, and it's not her fault. That right there, that is Uncle Jim. Always shirtless, always barefoot, and always fishing. That's the way I want to remember my Uncle Jim. Every time I take my boat out, I think of Uncle Jim, especially when I'm out offshore. And you can just close your eyes for a minute and just like hear the seagulls and hear the waves and just remember a happier, simpler time.
That is the milestone that I wish my dad was there for. Also didn't get to know the real me. I think he would have been very excited to have another son, as much as he loved calling me his little girl. This is my graduation photo. He was so proud, and it was one of the only accomplishments that he was there for. And just a smile on his face. In this moment, he was so proud. And I was so happy he was. It was a really good day. I miss his hugs a lot. And he always kissed the top of my head. Telling his story is definitely a part of my healing journey. Definitely still in that healing process, and I really don't think that it'll ever stop. It just gets less. A way that I like to look at grief is the grief doesn't get smaller. You just grow up around it. So that's kind of what I've been trying to Do.
That I'm sorry this happened to him. That he died alone. I just want him to be at peace. I hope that he's comfortable wherever he is, fishing.
The night the quiet town of Redstone went still, the wind carried a strange cold across the Colorado foothills, the kind of cold that makes porch lights flicker and dogs fall silent, as if something unseen were passing through. It was the last night anyone saw 17-year-old Lily Harrow alive, though no one realized it at the time. What people remembered from that late autumn evening in 2001 was not a scream, not a struggle, not even a shadow slipping between the trees. What they remembered was the feeling subtle, unnerving, inexplicable, that something had just gone terribly wrong long before anyone could say those words out loud. Lily had been walking home from her part-time shift at the Mountain View Diner, her apron folded under her arm, her hair tied back in the careless knot she always wore when she was too tired to do anything else. Her friends said she didn't look scared that night. She didn't look hunted. She looked like a girl who wanted to get home, crawl into bed, and forget the world for a few hours. But Redstone was small, the kind of town where sidewalks cracked early in the spring and streetlights buzzed as if whispering secrets. And somewhere along that familiar stretch of Pine Creek Road, a cold case that would haunt the next 2 decades began without warning, without witness, without mercy. The first sign that something was wrong came at sunrise. The diner opened at 6 a.m., and the owner, Hank Davis, noticed Lily's apron still hanging on the rack. She always brought it home. Always. He brushed it off at first. Maybe she forgot, maybe she swapped aprons, maybe she left in a hurry. But when her mother called, asking if Lily had come in early for a shift, she didn't have. Something tightened in Hank's chest, a knot forming before he could stop it. By 9 a.m., the town was whispering. By 10, they were searching. The search party moved down Pine Creek Road in a broken line, flashlights in hand, though the sun was already high. Volunteers fanned out through thick brush that scraped at their coats, calling her name as if she might step out from behind a tree and laugh about a misunderstanding. But each step forward brought only silence, heavy and consuming, the kind that stretches across miles and presses against the ribs like a warning. Her footprints were found near the old wooden bridge, one clear set in the dust, then suddenly, nothing, as if she'd vanished into thin air. Later, investigators would study those prints with a magnifying lens, running gloved fingers over the impressions as if the dirt itself might speak. But that first morning, all they found was emptiness. Redstone was no stranger to bad luck floods. Rock slides, storms that rolled down the mountain like punishment, but disappearance was different. Disappearance was personal. Disappearance meant someone out there had answers, while everyone else was left with questions sharp enough to cut. As noon spread a pale light across the valley, an officer marked the last footprint with a small orange flag. It fluttered in the wind like a distress signal, but there was no one around able or willing to respond. The investigation began with urgency that bordered on desperation. Detectives searched Lily's room, hoping for a diary entry, a crumpled note, a name circled in a school notebook. They found nothing but sketches taped to her wall drawings of trees and mountains and empty roads that seemed to echo her final walk home. The community clung to routine people, brewed coffee. Kids walked to school. Mailboxes clanged shut. But beneath that thin layer of normalcy, panic simmered. Each hour without answers tightened its grip. Authorities canvassed the length of Pine Creek Road, searching for tire marks, cigarette butts, anything that didn't belong, anything out of place. They found a single silver button in the dirt, not from her clothing, not from anyone she knew, a detail that would resurface again and again in reports, interviews, rumors whispered in barbershops and grocery aisles. a button small enough to overlook yet strange enough to leave a mark on the town's memory. Cold case investigators would one day circle that button in red ink, calling it the beginning, the clue that shocks the community, though no one knew that back then. Back then, it was just another mystery in a growing list of them. Students at Redstone High spoke quietly in hallways, their voices low, their feet uncertain, as if speaking too loudly might break some invisible thread holding the town together. Teachers paused mid-sentence, glancing toward empty desks. Parents double-checked locked doors twice, then 3 times. Police patrol cars crawled through neighborhoods with headlights on. Even in daylight, the officers inside, scanning faces, windows, yards, ditches. The missing posters, printed by the dozens, fluttered from telephone poles, the ink smearing when mist rolled down from the mountains at night. Every whisper fueled the fire. A neighbor heard a truck engine revving near the bridge. A jogger saw headlights where headlights shouldn't have been. A farmer claimed he'd heard a girl screaming 2 weeks earlier, but he wasn't sure and no one could confirm it. A gas station attendant swore a man came in that morning with mud up to his knees. Stories tangled together, forming a net of half-truths, exaggerations, and possibilities, none of which led anywhere solid. Investigators traced Lily's last known path again and again, their boots sinking into the soft earth, leaving marks where hers had ended. They noticed something peculiar. Birds avoided the area near the bridge. Even wildlife seemed to sense something, a disturbance, a residue of fear embedded in the soil. The sheriff dismissed the observation as superstition, but deputies whispered about it anyway, unable to ignore the eerie stillness that hung over that place. Days passed. Search parties thinned. Volunteers returned to work. Reporters arrived, then left when the story grew cold. The woods swallowed evidence, the trail faded, and the word missing grew heavy. But for Lily's mother, time didn't move. Her world froze on the night her daughter disappeared, the calendar stuck on a date she refused to flip past. Her hands trembled when she spoke to officers, her voice raw enough to make hardened detectives avert their eyes. She asked them every day, "Have you found her yet?" Every day they answered, "We're working on it." And every night she sat by the window waiting for a silhouette that never appeared at the end of the driveway. Weeks blurred into months. Snow fell in thick, silent blankets, covering Pine Creek Road like a burial shroud. The town decorated for Christmas, but lights flickered dimmer that year, their colors muted by grief. Children whispered about ghosts in the woods. Parents hushed them quickly, and church bells rang in tones that felt heavier, slower. The case files stacked up page after page of interviews, maps, photos, none of them bringing investigators any closer. The button remained the only unexplained clue, sitting in an evidence bag like a tiny metallic riddle. And then, just as winter began to thaw, a rumor surfaced. Someone claimed to have seen a figure near the abandoned mill south of town, a place as broken as Redstone's spirit. Officers searched the building, their flashlights cutting through dust-thick air. They found graffiti-shattered windows, piles of rusted machinery. And, on the concrete floor near the back corner, something else. A smear of red paint. Or, at least, that's what they told themselves at first. Forensic analysis later confirmed it wasn't paint at all. But they didn't know that yet. Not that night. Still, the sight of it made even the bravest officers shift uncomfortably, as if the empty building were breathing down their necks. The mill search changed nothing. No trace of Lily, no belongings, no clear link, just one more unsettling detail in a case already overflowing with unanswered questions. Investigators returned to their files. Townspeople returned to their routines. The silence returned to the foothills. And when spring finally emerged, warm winds carrying the smell of pine through the valley, it brought no relief. Because somewhere out there, beneath layers of time, lay a truth buried so deep it would take 20 years and a breakthrough discovery to unearth it. But in 2001, no one saw any of that coming. All they knew was that a girl had walked into the night and never reached her front door. A cold case had taken root. And Redstone, once peaceful, once predictable, would never be the same again. By the time summer settled over Redstone, the case file had already grown thick enough to fill a drawer. Yet investigators felt as though they were holding nothing but air. Every lead drifted away like smoke. Every interview circled back to the same hollow point. Lily Harrow had walked down Pine Creek Road, and then the world had swallowed her whole. But as the months passed, something else began to seep into the town's atmosphere. Something darker than fear. Something sharper than grief. It was suspicion, thin at first, then thickening like a storm cloud forming over the mountains. People watched each other differently. Conversations dropped when footsteps approached. A stranger passing through town drew too many eyes, too many questions. Even lifelong neighbors avoided direct glances. Parents gripped their children's wrists a little too tightly in the grocery store. Teenagers traveled in pairs, then stopped going out at all. The town would insist for years afterward that this change happened subtly, gradually. But the truth was simpler. Redstone had cracked. And the more days passed without answers, the wider those cracks spread. The sheriff's department, under pressure from state officials and restless citizens, widened the investigation. They requested records combed through databases, traced old complaints, petty crimes, even arguments overheard at the diner. They revisited anyone who lived within 2 miles of the bridge. They questioned truck drivers, hunters, hikers, drifters. But the trail remained cold, so cold it burned. That was when they turned their attention to someone closer to the Harrow family than anyone wanted to admit. His name was Wade Crocker, a cashier at the gas station on Main Street, a man who lived alone in a weather-beaten trailer tucked behind the ridge. He wasn't unusual enough to draw attention, not creepy enough to avoid, not charismatic enough to trust. But he'd been seen near the bridge a week before Lily vanished, and someone no one ever agreed who claimed he'd shown too much interest in the case, asking too many questions, offering theories no one asked for. It was thin, but thin was all investigators had. Officers brought him in for questioning, not as a suspect, they insisted, but as a person of interest, a phrase the news stations latched onto with desperate hunger. Wade didn't resist. He walked into the station, quietly folding his hat between his hands as he sat down across from the detectives. And for a moment, there was something eerie about his silence, the way his eyes drifted toward the window as though searching for an escape route, or a memory, or a ghost. The detectives leaned in, waiting for nervous tics, inconsistencies, signs of guilt. But Wade offered none. He said he'd been fixing a flat tire on the evening Lily disappeared. He said he never saw her. He said he didn't even know her beyond the way everyone in Redstone knew everyone. And when investigators searched his home, they found nothing. No clothing fibers, no traces of blood, no signs of a struggle, no hidden compartment holding her belongings. The only oddity was a faded collection of metal trinkets, buttons, pins, scrap pieces, objects he picked up during his hikes, he explained. Among them was one silver button nearly identical to the one found near the bridge, but it belonged to a different jacket model. A different era. It didn't match anything Lily wore that night. And just like that, suspicion evaporated. The town, ashamed of how quickly they'd turned on a man with no evidence against him, pretended they hadn't. Investigators apologized quietly behind closed doors, and Wade Crocker returned to his trailer with eyes hollowed from sleeplessness, disappearing from public life, almost entirely another casualty of the cold case, but not the last. As autumn approached, the investigation slowed. Meetings grew shorter, updates less frequent. Patrol cars stopped hovering by the bridge. New reports shifted attention toward other crimes in nearby counties. For the first time since Lily vanished, a strange stillness settled over Redstone, not relief, but resignation. And beneath that resignation, something else began to stir, the sense that maybe the mountain wasn't hiding the truth. Maybe the truth had been in town the entire time. One name that gained quiet attention during those months was Daniel Reed, Lily's co-worker at the diner. He was a year older than her, quiet, polite, the kind of teenager adults described as nice because they had nothing more specific to say. He'd walked her to the bus stop 12 times, and some students whispered that he liked her in a way that might have made the truth harder to hear. Detectives interviewed him twice. He said he'd gone straight home after work. His mother confirmed it. His younger sister told officers she'd seen him eating cereal in the kitchen that night. It was enough. No one pressed further. But rumors have a long life in small towns, surviving even when facts fail. People whispered that Daniel had been jealous of someone Lily was talking to, that he'd been angry after she declined a study meetup, that he'd been seen staring at her locker too long the week before. Whether any of this was true no longer mattered. What mattered was the shape of the story, the way it fit, the way it soothed a community desperate for a narrative. The sheriff, to his credit, refused to chase stories built from thin air, but once planted, suspicion grows, roots even concrete can't break. By late October, the case stalled completely. Files sat untouched on desks, evidence boxes gathered dust, officers spoke about the investigation in past tense. Some argued they'd overlooked something obvious, others argued the case was doomed from the start. And then there were those who believed Lily had simply chosen to leave, run away, start over, vanish by choice. That idea angered the Harrow family more than any false accusation. Lily wasn't the type to run, they insisted. She wasn't the type to hide. She wasn't the type to leave without saying goodbye. As winter returned, the cold case settled into its name. Newspapers stopped printing updates. Volunteers stopped asking when the next search would be. People no longer paused when they drove past the bridge. Pine Creek Road became just another stretch of pavement, though no one walked it alone after dark. And in town, an uneasy equilibrium took hold, one built not on truth but on exhaustion. Yet Lily's mother refused to accept that quiet decay. Every week she visited the sheriff's office with new questions, new theories, new observations, pulled from memory or sleepless nights. Sometimes she brought cookies as though hoping kindness would stir movement. Sometimes she brought photos of Lily, taped with handwritten notes. Sometimes she simply sat in the lobby, staring at the clock as if waiting for time itself to shift or bend or reveal something it had hidden. One of those days in early winter, she brought something new, a small notebook. She'd found it under Lily's mattress. Inside were doodles, scribbled thoughts, lyrics, lists, ordinary things. But one page caught investigators' attention, a half-finished sketch of the old wooden bridge. Under it, a line written in hurried pencil. He kept watching from the truck. Detectives asked her if Lily had mentioned anyone watching her. She said no. They asked if Lily had felt afraid walking home. She said she didn't know. They asked if she recognized the handwriting as recent. She said she couldn't tell. But something in her face shifted that day, something dimmed, as if she realized that whatever truth her daughter had carried, she'd taken it with her into the night. The notebook reignited the case, albeit briefly. Officers revisited the bridge this time with fresh eyes. They studied possible angles from which someone in a truck could watch a pedestrian blind spots, pull off areas, tire tracks long washed away. But nothing new emerged. The page could have been imagination. It could have been unrelated. It could have been written a year before Lily disappeared. And without context, it was nothing more than a haunting sentence suspended in uncertainty. Still, the page sparked new whispers. People wondered about logging trucks that passed through town, about delivery drivers making late-night runs, about the man who'd moved away 2 weeks after Lily vanished, about the highway worker who'd quit suddenly that fall. Redstone became a place where every headlight held menace. Every motor rumble carried a question mark. But the most disturbing whisper came from a local hiker named Grant McCall. He told deputies he'd seen a pickup truck parked halfway down Pine Creek Road 2 nights before Lily vanished. The truck's engine was running. Its lights were off. And inside sat a figure he couldn't describe, motionless, watching the road. Grant didn't report it at the time because he assumed it was a hunter or someone waiting for a friend. But after reading about the notebook, the memory hit him like a punch. Detectives asked him for details: color, shape, model, plates. But Grant's recollection was vague. Fog had been thick that night. He'd been half asleep from a late shift. All he remembered clearly was the stillness of the figure inside the truck, the way they didn't turn, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge his presence at all, as if they were waiting, as if they were listening. The truck sighting became another unsolved piece in a puzzle no one could assemble. Without evidence, without dates, without clarity, it slid into the growing category of maybe. But for the Harrow family, it was enough to reignite their hope. Someone had been on that road. Someone had been watching. Someone might still be out there. By early spring of 2002, the case reached its inevitable plateau. Investigators labeled it inactive. Files were boxed up. Evidence was sealed. And the town braced itself for the reality it had been avoiding. The truth might never come. Lily's mother stopped bringing cookies. She stopped visiting weekly. She stopped writing notes for investigators. And although she never said it aloud, her silence carried a heavier weight than any words she could have offered. But time, unlike Redstone, never sits still. And buried beneath those boxes, those interviews, those quiet assumptions, a detail waited, ignored, overlooked, insignificant at first glance. A detail that 20 years later would pull the entire cold case back from the dead and send shockwaves through the community. Redstone didn't know it yet. Investigators didn't know it yet. But the breakthrough discovery that would crack open the truth was already sitting in an evidence drawer, quiet as a heartbeat no one was listening for. In the years that followed the official shelving of the case, Redstone changed in ways people refused to acknowledge. Not openly, not in conversations or town meetings, but quietly in the way people walked a little faster after sunset, in the way strangers were greeted with polite stiffness, in the way Pine Creek Road aged faster than the rest of town, its pavement cracking, as though rejecting memory itself. The bridge became a landmark no one mentioned. Children stopped daring each other to cross it. Couples refused to linger near it after dusk. Even the wind seemed to move differently through that stretch of road, as if avoiding the place entirely. But while the town tried to bury its unease under festivals, parades, and high school football games, one man refused to forget. Detective Samuel Hayes, who had joined the department the same year Lily disappeared, carried the case file home with him long after it was closed. He never discussed it. He never spoke of it in briefings or over drinks. But the weight of that file pressed on him like a phantom limb, always there, always aching. He'd been a rookie then, too young, too hopeful, too trusting of procedure. He'd believed that if you just worked hard enough, every truth would eventually reveal itself. Redstone had taught him otherwise. By 2004, Hayes had risen to sergeant, his once hopeful eyes hardened by scenes he didn't talk about and cases he couldn't unsee. Yet Lily's case lingered in the back of his mind like unfinished business. The button, the truck, the footprint that ended without explanation, the drawing of the bridge, the smear in the mill. Individually, they were nothing. Together they formed a pattern he didn't yet understand, like pieces of a map he couldn't read. One evening, after a shift that stretched too long and yielded too little, Hayes returned to the station alone. The building was quiet. The lights flickered in the hallway, a long-standing electrical issue the county refused to fix. Something drew him back to the evidence room, some restless instinct he couldn't shake. He unlocked the door, passed through rows of cases long forgotten, and stopped at the box labeled Harrow Lily, 2001. He stared at the label before touching it, as if expecting the cardboard to push back. Then he lifted the lid. Inside were the familiar items, photographs, statements maps, the worn notebook, the single silver button sealed in its plastic bag. He held the bag up to the overhead light, watching the metal catch a faint glimmer. It felt heavier than he remembered. He turned it over, noting again the scratched underside, the tiny indentation he'd assumed was a manufacturing defect. His thumb lingered over the scratch through the plastic, tracing its shape straight on one end, then curved abruptly like a hook. Something about it tugged at his thoughts. He set it down and exhaled slowly. Cases like this had a way of sinking hooks into you, of dragging you back into the depths, even when you thought you'd escaped, and Hayes had never escaped. That same week, Redstone saw an influx of hikers drawn by early summer trails, the town filled with unfamiliar faces. Backpacks, tents, rented SUVs crowding the streets. Most were harmless, eager for mountain air and scenic overlooks. But one of them, a geology student from out of state, stumbled into the sheriff's office 2 days later with an odd report. He'd been exploring an old service road near the ridge when he found something metallic glinting beneath a fallen log. He assumed at first it was a piece of camping gear, maybe dropped by a careless hiker, but when he picked it up, its strange weight and shape unsettled him enough to bring it in. Hayes opened the evidence envelope in front of him. Inside lay a small weathered metal clasp, broken, bent, the kind used on older jackets, heavy-duty, durable. He turned it in his gloved hand, studying its curve, its hinge. Something fluttered in his chest. It looked familiar, not identical, but related somehow, like two pieces from the same era, the same manufacturer, the same mystery. He placed the clasp beside the original button. Their metal tones matched almost perfectly. The scratches, the wear patterns, even the faint discoloration along one edge. A faint charge rippled beneath Hayes' skin. Not certainty, not yet, but the flicker of something long dormant. Still, the location where it was found bothered him. The service road the student described was miles from Pine Creek Road, nowhere near the mill, nowhere near town. A place with no connection unless Hayes thought the connection was hidden underground beneath the years. When he visited the location the next morning, the air felt unnaturally still, as if the mountains themselves were listening. Pine needles blanketed the ground in thick layers. Fallen branches created uneven shadows. The service road was barely recognizable, reclaimed by time and erosion. Hayes crouched near the fallen log, running his hand through the dirt where the clasp had been found. He scanned the area, nothing obvious, nothing disturbed. But as he stood, his boot struck something solid. Not stone, not wood. Metal. He knelt again, brushing aside debris until a narrow strip of rusted steel emerged from the soil. Longer brushing revealed more of it, flat, rectangular with flaking paint barely clinging to its surface. He followed its path until the ground dipped slightly, where shapes blurred beneath dirt and moss. Hayes stepped back. It wasn't a piece of equipment. It wasn't debris. It was the roof of a vehicle, a truck. His breath stalled for one violent heartbeat. He steadied himself, scanning the forest for any sign of disturbance, any tracks, any indication that someone had recently been here. There were none. The truck had been buried not by shovels, but by time, by landslides, storms, seasons of forest growth. Years had turned it into part of the landscape. Hayes' pulse hammered in his ears. He called in assistance, his voice steady, but his skin electric with alarm. When the excavation team arrived, even they paused at the site. The vehicle was nearly intact beneath the layers of earth, its frame rusted but recognizable. A pickup truck, mid-90s dark paint, faded to ghostly gray. Hayes circled it slowly, noting the crushed hood, the shattered windshield, the decaying interior barely visible through the collapsed roof. Then he saw it, the door handle missing. He crouched beside the driver's side. The handle had not snapped off. It had been forcibly ripped away. A jagged bolt protruded from the panel, the same shape, the same size, the same placement as the hook-like indentation on the button recovered 2 decades earlier. Hayes' skin prickled. The button had been torn from clothing during a struggle, and now he was staring at the truck that had done the tearing. For the first time in years, the cold case breathed. As forensic teams worked, Hayes inspected the truck bed. Layers of dirt hid most of it, but something faint, something dark, clung to a corner of the decayed liner. He brushed it gently. A smear of reddish-brown flaked under his glove. Age had destroyed any forensic value, but the implication hung heavy. Blood. The next discovery came from the passenger side floor, buried under debris, a fragment of fabric, small, dirty, but tightly woven and faded in a familiar pastel pattern. Hayes froze. It matched a description burned into his memory, a light blue floral undershirt Lily had been wearing beneath her diner uniform the night she disappeared. His chest tightened. His vision flickered not with emotion, but with reawakening purpose. Every synapse lit at once. This was the truck Grant McCall had seen. The one parked with its engine running lights off. The one sitting in the dark like a predator waiting for prey. But there was something else about the truck. Something stranger than its location, stranger than its buried state. The license plate had been removed, deliberately. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide this vehicle, driving it off-road, abandoning it in a remote stretch, leaving it to be claimed by weather and time. But the burial wasn't entirely natural. The way soil compacted around the truck, the angle at which it rested, the absence of large rocks or debris atop it. Someone had chosen this place, yet they had not returned. As the team prepared the vehicle for transport, Hayes felt a presence behind him. When he turned, Sheriff McKinley stood there, shoulders stiff beneath his coat. "You think this is connected?" the sheriff asked. Hayes didn't answer immediately. His eyes traced the outline of the truck, measuring fate against coincidence. "It's not a matter of what I think," Hayes said quietly. "It's a matter of what this truck is screaming." The sheriff exhaled, long, defeated. 20 years, Hayes. 20 years and not a single lead. Until now. That night, the discovery spread through Redstone like wildfire. Phones rang. Newspapers issued special alerts. Social media pulsed with speculation. A buried truck found near the ridge. Possible connection to cold case. Breakthrough discovery shocks entire community. People gathered outside the station demanding answers, demanding updates, demanding a suspect, demanding closure. The sheriff's department offered none only confirmation that the vehicle was likely relevant to ongoing inquiries. The rest remained sealed behind thick walls and exhausted eyes. Inside the station, Hayes stared at the evidence lined up on the table. The button, the clasp, the fabric, the photos of the buried truck. For 2 decades, Redstone had lived under a cloud of doubt and fear, assuming the truth was lost forever. But the truth had not been lost. It had been waiting, waiting in the dirt, waiting under fallen branches, waiting in the shadows of a forgotten road, waiting for someone determined enough to dig it out. Yet as Hayes stood over the growing collection of clues, a shift rippled through his thoughts, an unease without a shape. Because something about the truck felt wrong, not the burial, not the missing plate, not even the blood traces. No, it was the absence of something. There should have been signs of animals disturbing the area. There should have been erosion patterns inconsistent with natural burial. There should have been metal scavenging. There should have been decay on the fabric, beyond what they found. But there wasn't. It was as if the truck had been protected, kept safe from interference, shielded, hidden by something or someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And Hayes, for the first time in years, felt that cold breath on the back of his neck again. The one he'd felt the morning they found the footprint that ended without a trace. The case wasn't reopening. It had never been closed. The buried truck marked the end of Redstone's quiet denial. In the space of one shattering discovery, the town was dragged back into the nightmare it had spent years trying to bury. The bridge, the road the missing posters pulled from telephone poles, everything flooded back into the public consciousness with the force of a reopened wound. Old fears resurfaced, old suspicions crept back, old theories found their way into late-night conversations, whispered over fences and flickering porch lights. But for Detective Samuel Hayes, the resurfacing of the truck wasn't just a breakthrough. It was a warning, a message delivered across 2 decades, buried just deeply enough to buy time. Someone had hidden the truth long ago, and now the earth had returned it. But the question clawing at Hayes' mind wasn't who did it. It was why the burial felt almost too intentional, too clean, too methodical. As if the person responsible had understood the terrain, the weather patterns, the way the forest reclaimed what didn't belong. As if they had counted on time to finish the job. While the forensics team secured their findings, Hayes spent hours analyzing every angle of the truck's remains. The rust, the crushed panels, the shattered windshield, it all pointed to an older accident, an impact, a struggle. Yet something bothered him. The way the interior had collapsed did not align with natural decay. It looked like someone had smashed it from the inside before abandoning it, as if whoever drove that truck into the woods never intended to come back, never intended to drive it out again. But there was no body inside. That fact alone felt like a silent threat. The next morning, the truck was transported to a secure facility in the county crime lab. Media vans trailed behind like scavengers circling fresh prey. Reporters shoved microphones toward the sheriff's deputies, hurling questions that had no answers. Is this connected to the Harrow case? Have you found a suspect? Is the killer still in Redstone? The sheriff said nothing. Hayes said even less, but everyone felt the same pressure building something old had resurfaced, and it demanded to be heard. Inside the lab, Hayes watched as technicians examined the vehicle under bright overhead lights. The chassis groaned as they lifted it. Dirt fell like ash. Every inch of metal was photographed, swabbed, tested. Hayes leaned over the hood, tracing the cracked paint with his eyes, and that's when he noticed it. Something no one had seen beneath the dirt and rust. A faint imprint. A rectangular outline barely visible on the hood's surface. It was the ghost of a sticker long peeled away, but its shape remained. Hayes squinted, following the faint borders. The outline was familiar, not generic, like dealership labels, not small, like a parking permit. It looked like a company logo. A business, a workplace, a utility service. His pulse quickened. He snapped a photo, then asked the lab tech to enhance the contrast. Slowly an image emerged, not perfectly, not clearly, but enough to make out what had once been printed there, a mountain silhouette. And beneath it, barely legible letters. H-A-R? He froze. He enlarged the image again. The letters sharpened. H-A-R-L-O. Harlock Timber Company, whispered a voice behind him. Hayes turned. It was one of the older technicians, a man who'd been around the county longer than most. They shut down years ago. Used to handle forest clearing, wildfire mitigation, that sort of thing. Their trucks had that exact logo. Hayes' heart thudded with a heavy realization. He remembered the Harlock yard, rusted fencing, abandoned trailers, stacks of splintering wood left to rot. The company had gone bankrupt in 2002, right after Lily disappeared. Right after. He stepped back from the truck, the weight of the revelation settling into his bones. Someone connected to Harlock Timber had access to vehicles like this one? Someone with knowledge of the forest? Someone who understood how to hide things in plain sight. But who? Redstone had no shortage of former Harlock employees. Many had left town when the company folded. Others stayed blending back into ordinary life as if the collapse had never happened. Hayes found himself flipping through old employment logs in the sheriff's basement archive, the names blurred together. Drivers, sawyers, equipment operators, maintenance workers. A sea of potential suspects. But as Hayes scanned the list, one name caught his eye, not because it stood out, but because it didn't. Brenton Calder. A mechanic. Low profile. Few records. No criminal history. Nothing remarkable on paper. But there was a note beside his name. Something small, handwritten by an officer long retired. Quit abruptly. No forwarding address. Quit. Not laid off. Not transferred. Quit. Hayes leaned back in his chair. The quiet ones, the unnoticed ones, they were often the ones who slipped through the cracks, and Redstone had let many cracks form after the Harlock collapse. But chasing a 2-decade-old ghost would have to wait. There was something more immediate demanding his attention. The fragment of fabric found in the truck had been sent for textile analysis. While DNA was unlikely after all this time, fibers could still tell a story, especially if they matched clothing from Lily's last known outfit. The lab contacted Hayes that afternoon with a preliminary finding. The fragment's weave dye pattern and thread count aligned with clothing manufactured for a limited period, late 1990s to early 2000s. Not definitive, but consistent. And the floral print was near identical to the one Lily's mother had described. Enough to strengthen the connection, enough to tighten the noose around whoever had driven that truck. Yet the most unsettling discovery wasn't the fabric. It wasn't the rust patterns. It wasn't the missing plate. It was the locker key, found wedged beneath the passenger seat. The metal was worn and tarnished its tag blank. Not a house key, not a car key. A locker key, simple utilitarian, the kind found in industrial workplaces, gyms, storage facilities. And Hayes recognized its shape instantly. Harlock Timber used those keys. Every employee was assigned one for the equipment shed. He felt the ground shift under him. The case was no longer drifting in the realm of speculation. It had anchored itself firmly in reality. That night, Hayes returned to the Harlock Timber site with a flashlight and a sense of dread twisting in his gut. The property lay at the edge of the forest like a graveyard of forgotten industry. Corrugated metal walls groaned in the wind. Chains clattered against empty gates. Piles of rotting timber cast jagged shadows across cracked concrete. He stepped inside the equipment shed. Dust rose with each footfall. Rows of empty lockers stood like silent sentinels. Their doors dented their paint, chipped. Many hung open. Others were shut, rust sealing them like tombs. Hayes traced his finger along the numbers until he reached the locker corresponding to the key. Locker 27. The metal was cold. His hand trembled slightly as he inserted the key, hearing the lock click with a softness that felt wrong, too smooth for a lock untouched for 20 years. He opened the door. Inside was nothing, at least at first glance. But then his eyes dropped to the floor of the locker. A slit in the back panel, barely noticeable. A seam of metal separated from its weld. Hayes knelt, pulling the panel forward. His stomach clenched as the metal bent away to reveal a hollow space behind it. Inside lay a plastic bag, sealed, untouched. A relic preserved by secrecy rather than time. He pulled it out carefully, shining his flashlight through the cloudy plastic. Inside were 3 items: a leather work glove, a small knife, and a folded piece of paper. Hayes didn't open it there. His instincts warned him this was evidence a thread tied to someone who had walked into the forest with Lily's fate in their hands. He sealed the locker, backed out of the shed, and radioed the sheriff before the magnitude of what he'd found could settle fully into his chest. Back at the lab, surrounded by technicians and investigators, Hayes opened the bag once it was properly logged. The glove was worn, the knife small enough to hide easily, its blade dull, but stained with something time had turned an unrecognizable brown. But the paper unfolded into a crude map. A map of the Harlock timber property and the surrounding woods. And circled in dark ink, drawn with a heavy shaking hand, was a point labeled only with one word: Stop! The circle was positioned hundreds of yards from the old service road, near a rocky outcrop, a place easily missed. A place where a truck might be hidden, or something else. The room went silent as every eye fell on the circled point. Hayes felt his throat tighten. A chill slid down his spine. This wasn't a clue left behind. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message from whoever had stood in that same shed 20 years earlier, drawing a circle around the place where something had happened, something the dirt had not yet revealed. And Hayes realized in that moment that the truck was only the beginning. The forest was still hiding the rest. The map weighed on Hayes's mind long after the meeting dispersed, long after the evidence was sealed away, long after the sheriff's weary voice faded into the echo of closing doors. The circle drawn on that sheet of paper, dark, uneven, pressed down with force, pulled at him with a gravity he couldn't escape. The word beside it, handwritten in thick strokes, didn't offer explanation. It didn't offer context. It simply ordered. Stop. No date. No signature. No coordinates. Just a point in the woods and a warning that felt less like a marker and more like a command carved into the bones of the case itself. The next morning, under a sky still bruised from dawn, Hayes led a small team toward the spot. They moved quietly. Equipment slung over their shoulders, their boots sinking into dew-soaked soil. The forest felt tense, as if listening again, every shift of branches too sharp, every rustle of leaves too deliberate. Sunlight leaked through the canopy in narrow slivers, illuminating particles in the air like suspended secrets. The rocky outcrop circled on the map wasn't far from the buried truck, less than 200 yards. Close enough that someone familiar with the terrain could move between the two under cover of darkness. Close enough that events separated by minutes could have unfolded in both places. When they reached the clearing, Hayes slowed. The outcrop jutted from the earth like a broken spine, its surface cracked moss, clinging in long strips. At first glance, there was nothing unusual. No disturbed soil, no debris, no hidden structures. But Hayes felt something shift in his chest, a tightening, an instinct honed by years of staring at places that didn't look wrong until they revealed exactly how wrong they were. He approached the rock face, running his hand along the surface. Dirt clung to his palm. He stepped back, scanning the ground. Something was off not by appearance, but by texture. The soil near the base was darker, softer, as if it had been turned long ago and then pressed back down. Nature had reclaimed the surface, but underneath the earth held memory. Start a grid, Hayes ordered. Careful. This area is old. Don't assume anything. The team marked off squares with string moving with slow, methodical precision. Metal detectors swept back and forth, Shovels bit into soil in quiet intervals. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. 20 minutes passed. 30. An hour. Nothing. Just earth roots rocks hidden in the dark. But then, a technician knelt abruptly, brushing soil from something pale and rigid. "Sir," she whispered. Hayes moved quickly. The object was small, almost insignificant in size, but unmistakable in shape. A portion of bone. Not enough to identify, not enough to prove anything alone. But it wasn't animal. Hayes knew it instantly. The density, the smoothness, the faint curvature. Human. Another piece surfaced a few inches away. And another. The team worked faster, adrenaline pushing aside caution. As more soil fell away, the grim truth emerged, not a full skeleton, but fragments, scattered, broken, weathered. Time had gnawed at them, the forest had tried to claim them, and erosion had done its work. But what remained was enough. Enough to know. Enough to feel the weight of 20 years collapse into the present. The clearing filled with a heavy quiet. Hayes stared at the fragments, his breath slow, his pulse steady only on the surface. Inside, something beat harder, something angry, something grieving. He crouched beside the largest fragment, a piece of rib cracked near the edge. Beside it lay a thin piece of fabric, barely recognizable threads fused to dirt fragile enough to crumble under touch. Light blue, floral, the same pattern they had matched in the truck. For a moment, the forest spun, the years compressed into a single point. The night of Lily's disappearance wasn't a distant memory anymore. It was here, under the soil, whispering through every broken piece. But there was more. Something metallic glinted under the next layer of dirt. Carefully, a technician lifted it free. A necklace chain, delicate, rusted, broken near the clasp. Hayes swallowed hard. He remembered the photos. Lily wore a necklace, silver chain, tiny pendant, a birthday gift from her mother. The pendant was never recovered. No one spoke. The chain dangled between gloved fingers, swaying gently in the forest breeze, as though alive. When the forensic lead finally broke the silence, her voice was low. "Given the condition, these remains have been here a long time." How long, Hayes asked, though he already knew. Years, many years, at least 2 decades. A chill crawled down his spine. Lily had never left Redstone. She'd been here all along, buried beneath a map that seemed less like a clue and more like a confession. But whose confession? The knife, the glove, the map, the truck, the key, the missing plate. None of it felt random. Not anymore. It felt deliberate. Intentional. As if the person responsible had left a trail not to be solved quickly, but to haunt anyone who tried. A trail designed with pauses, with misdirection, with gaps only they understood. Someone who had drawn a circle on the map not as a guide, but as a warning. Someone who had wanted whoever followed to feel the weight of every step. But why hide the truck and then mark the outcrop? Why leave a locker key behind? Why leave anything behind at all? Unless Hayes' breath caught. Unless the person had never expected anyone to find it. The map wasn't meant for investigators. It was meant for themselves. A reminder. A mark. A private note left behind by a mind that needed to know where the truth lived, even if no one else ever did. He stood slowly. The forest felt different now, heavier, darker, pressing against them like a presence. The team collected the remains, carefully recording every angle, every inch, every shadow of the site. Hayes took one last look before they sealed the bags. "This is her," he said quietly. No one questioned it. The discovery hit Redstone like a thunderclap. The announcement wasn't public yet, but whispers moved faster than official reports ever could. People who had avoided the Harrow case for years suddenly found themselves drawn into conversations, into speculation, into guilt. The town felt smaller. Its air thicker. The shadows longer. But the identification of remains didn't answer the most crucial question. It only sharpened it. Who buried Lily Harrow under that outcrop? And why had they kept the location tethered to themselves through a crudely drawn map hidden inside a locker that no longer existed on any official record? That evening, Hayes sat alone in the station with the map spread across his desk. He ran his thumb over the thick circle, the ink sunken deep into the paper. He imagined the hand that drew it, shaking, forceful, deliberate. Someone nervous, someone desperate, someone methodical, someone waiting. He placed the map beside the list of former Harlock employees. The names blurred again, but one stood out more sharply now. Brenton Calder. Quit abruptly. No forwarding address, worked in areas near the ridge, including road maintenance, drove company trucks, had access to every vehicle, every locker, every key. Hayes tried to pull records, employment files, residence addresses, tax documents. But for Brent and Calder, the files were thinner than they should have been. Pages missing, gaps in data, holes large enough to swallow a background check. People didn't just vanish from paper unless someone let them or helped them. He closed the file, mind racing. Why would Calder hide a vehicle but not destroy the map? Why would he mark the location instead of erasing it? Why leave a locker key? Why leave anything that connected to him? Unless he didn't think he was leaving things behind. Unless he thought he was coming back. But he never did. Something stopped him. Something stopped the person who drew that map before they could return to the outcrop or the truck or any of the evidence left behind. Hayes inhaled sharply. The word circled on the map, stop, suddenly carried a new meaning. Not an instruction. A statement. A moment. A final event. The place where everything ended. Where the killer's timeline halted. Where the trail froze in time. And if the killer stopped there, what stopped him? The room felt smaller. The air heavier. Hayes stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. He grabbed his coat, the map, the list of names, and the flashlight. He moved with purpose, driven by something fierce and instinctive. He wasn't going back to the outcrop. Not yet. He was going somewhere else. Somewhere he had overlooked. Somewhere the killer might have gone after burying Lily. Somewhere close enough to reach, but far enough to disappear. Because someone had buried a girl in the forest. Someone had hidden a truck. Someone had drawn a map. And someone had never walked out of those woods again. Hayes drove into the night with the engine humming beneath him like a pulse he couldn't quiet. The map lay beside him on the passenger seat, illuminated in brief flashes by passing streetlights. The circled point, stop, glowed like an accusation every time the paper caught the light, not an instruction, not a warning. A moment, frozen in ink, a last breath captured by a hand that never had the chance to write anything again. He didn't head towards the outcrop. He didn't return to the truck, the mill, or the Harlock property. His instincts tugged him somewhere else, somewhere that had been hiding in plain sight, overshadowed by louder theories and more dramatic evidence. The case had always been a puzzle of proximity, the bridge, the diner, the service road. Everyone had looked outward, toward the mountain, the forest, the isolated spaces where shadows lingered thickest. No one had looked inward. No one had looked at where a killer might have gone when the woods swallowed him up. Redstone was surrounded on 3 sides by forest, but the 4th side held something else entirely, something most residents drove past every day without a second thought: the abandoned Harlock timber housing units. A row of decaying structures built for seasonal workers decades earlier. Most had collapsed under snow or rot. Some stood on shaky stilts, groaning in the wind. They were forgotten, ignored, unclaimed. If someone needed a place to hide after burying a truck, if someone collapsed injured, panicked, dying, those units would be the closest refuge, the only refuge, a place where a killer's final footprints might still whisper beneath the dust. Hayes turned down the cracked road leading to the housing area, his headlights slicing through the dark. The structures appeared like skeletons, rising from the earth rooflines, caved-in windows, shattered doors hanging crooked from rusted hinges. The night air thickened as he stepped out, crunching gravel under his boots. The wind hissed across broken siding like a warning or a plea. Hayes felt his hand drift toward his flashlight before he even realized he'd reached for it. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating, peeling paint, warped wood, the hollow mouths of abandoned doorways. He entered the first unit. Dust exploded under his steps. Cobwebs clung to corners like netting. The air smelled of rot metal and something else, something faintly organic like old decay. He moved slowly, shining his light over collapsed furniture, shattered glass stains on the floor too old to identify. Nothing here connected to Lily, nothing here connected to Calder, nothing but silence. The second unit looked no different, nor the third, but the fourth. The fourth stopped him cold. Its door wasn't broken, it wasn't hanging, it was closed. Closed. Hayes stepped forward cautiously, his breath tightening. No animals had pushed it. No windstorm had slammed it shut. Closed doors were deliberate. He placed his hand on the wood, cold, too cold. He pushed. The door groaned open, and the smell hit him first. Not rot, not mildew. Metal, like rust mixed with something coppery, something time had tried to erase, but couldn't. His flashlight cut through the stale darkness and landed on the floorboards. Footprints. Old, dusty, barely visible, but human. They led inside, then stopped. Not trailed out. Stopped, as if whoever left them never took another step. Hayes entered slowly, sweeping the beam across the room. The space was small, single-bed frame, broken chair table turned on its side. A jacket lay crumpled in one corner, rotten fabric eaten through by insects and years. He crouched and lifted part of it with his gloved hand. The material disintegrated instantly, falling through his fingers like ash. His light passed over the far wall and something glinted. Metal. A canteen. Old military surplus, dented, coated in dust. He picked it up, dry. Empty for years. But as he turned it, the beam caught on a name etched faintly into the surface. BC. Brenton Calder. His chest clenched. He swept the light to the floor beside the canteen. More fragments. Not bone, not clothing. Paper. He knelt and lifted the pieces carefully. The largest fragment held part of a sketch, a rough drawing of the Harlock yard. The lines were frantic, shaky. Another scrap held a partial word, close, or perhaps chose. The ink was faded, muddled by moisture, time, and decay. But the most chilling discovery lay a foot away from the scraps. A boot. Collapsed inward leather, cracked sole split. Not remarkable on its own, until Hayes turned it over and saw what was embedded in the heel. Soil. Fine-grained dark mixed with pine needles and microscopic flecks of quartz. The same soil found near the outcrop. The same soil found inside the buried truck. He was in the place where Calder had come after burying Lily, or at least where he had tried to come. Hayes rose to his feet, scanning the room again slowly, methodically. Something still felt wrong. The footprints, the stillness, the lack of disturbance. If Calder came here, why weren't there signs of him leaving? Had he hidden something? Had he collapsed? Had he been injured? Or Hayes's flashlight caught something behind the bed frame. A narrow crack in the floorboards, just barely wide enough to slip a hand through. He knelt, prying at the warped wood until it lifted with a brittle snap. A cavity lay beneath. Inside it, a metal box. Small, rusted, locked with a latch weakened by age. Hayes lifted it cautiously. His pulse thundered in his ears as he carried it to the light, streaming through a broken window. He eased the latch open. It gave way with a soft metallic sigh as though releasing a breath held for decades. Inside, wrapped in decayed cloth, lay 3 objects. A ring, a photograph, and a notebook. Hayes removed the ring, first simple silver interior engraved with a date so faint he had to tilt it toward the light. 2000. Lily would have been 16. He set the ring aside and unfolded the photograph. The image was water-damaged, edges curled, but the faces were clear enough. Lily Harrow smiling, leaning against a railing with mountains behind her. Her hair wind-tangled, her eyes bright. Next to her, slightly out of focus, stood a young man. Brenton Calder. Hayes stared at the image, his breath thin. The official narrative, the assumption that Lily didn't know Calder, was collapsing. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't a chance encounter on Pine Creek Road. They had known each other, maybe briefly, maybe secretly, but they had stood close enough to fit in a single frame. Hayes picked up the notebook last. Thin, mold-stained, its pages warped. He opened it delicately, and faded ink lines bled through the paper like veins. The first legible entry stopped him cold. I didn't mean for it to happen. Hayes read on, squinting against the faded script. She fell. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I tried to help. I didn't know what to do. His chest tightened. I keep seeing her at the bridge. I keep seeing the way she looked at me. Not scared. Just surprised. Hayes flipped the page. The truck is hidden. I marked the place. I marked where she is. I'll go back when the storm passes. Another page. But someone followed me. I heard them. They were there, watching. I can't go back. Not yet. Hayes' stomach churned. Someone else at the forest. Someone watching Calder. He turned the page. Blank. The next few were too faded to read words disintegrated into stains. But the final page held one last fragment, still visible, written with force, the ink darker as if pressed harder into the page. It's not safe. They know. The notebook slipped slightly in Hayes' grip. They More than one. Or a single person Calder couldn't name. He exhaled shakily, grounding himself. Calder hadn't been the hunter. He hadn't stalked Lily. He hadn't been the monster Redstone imagined. He had been part of something, yes, but something that spiraled beyond him. Maybe an accident, maybe panic, maybe guilt that crushed him, but not the cold, calculated malice the case had long suggested. And someone else had been there that night. Someone who saw him. Someone who followed him. Someone who knew what he had done and who waited. Hayes closed the notebook, sealing it back into the evidence bag. The forest outside seemed heavier, the air thicker, as though the truth he'd uncovered had rippled outward into the night, stirring something that had been waiting in the dark. Because this revelation didn't close the case. It blew it open. Brenton Calder hadn't been the end of the trail. He was the beginning. And someone out there, someone still alive, had been watching both Lily and Calder that night. Someone who had never come forward. Someone who had stayed hidden for 20 years. And Hayes, standing alone in the decaying skeleton of an abandoned housing unit, finally understood the meaning of the circle on the map. Stop wasn't the place where the killer ended. It was the place where Calder had realized he wasn't alone in the forest. Hayes stepped out of the abandoned housing unit with the metal box sealed tightly under his arm, the night folding around him like a closing fist. The air felt changed, charged, tense, thick with the weight of a truth that had been trapped for 20 years. The forest seemed to lean in branches, whispering a warning he could almost decipher. You're not supposed to be here. He walked briskly across the gravel, his boots crunching the ground in uneven pulses. Every shadow felt watchful. Every gust of wind seemed to move with purpose. The knowledge he carried the notebook, the ring the photograph sat in his chest like a ticking bomb. Someone else had been in the forest with Calder, someone who watched him bury a truck, someone who followed him after Lily's death, someone who knew, and someone who had kept their silence for 2 decades. Hayes reached his car, opened the door, and paused. The hair rose along the back of his neck, not from cold, not from exhaustion, but from a sensation deeper and older, the sense of eyes on him, watching from between the trees, a gaze that felt neither familiar nor friendly. He scanned the forest line. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing broke the stillness. Yet the feeling didn't leave. He got into the car and locked the doors, his pulse steady, but his jaw tight. He placed the metal box carefully on the passenger seat beside the map. The two sat there like twin anchors dragging the weight of the past into the present. As he drove away, headlights cutting between the black pillars of pine, he glanced at the rearview mirror. In the distance, the 4th housing unit receded into darkness, silent, hollow, and still holding secrets beneath its rotting boards. But one thing was certain now. Brenton Calder hadn't vanished into thin air. He'd been swallowed by something larger, something that moved in Redstone long before Lily Harrow walked down Pine Creek Road, something that still moved. Back at the sheriff's office, Hayes spread the contents of the box across a steel table under harsh fluorescent lights. The photograph, the ring, the notebook, a collection of ghosts arranged like an indictment. Sheriff McKinley hovered nearby, grim-faced, his hands planted on his hips. "You're telling me Calder knew Lily McKinley," said quietly. Hayes didn't look up. He didn't just know her. They spent time together. Enough that he had her picture. Enough that he carried a ring. You think it was romantic? I think it was something. Something quiet. Something they didn't tell anyone about. McKinley exhaled slowly, the sound heavy. Her mother. I know, Hayes said, his voice softer, but we tell her the truth, no matter how long it's been. McKinley rubbed his forehead. What about the notebook? The entries? Hayes turned the worn pages toward him. The sheriff read the fragments with tightening lips, his eyes narrowing as he reached the crucial lines. I didn't mean for it to happen. I keep seeing her at the bridge. Someone followed me. I heard them. They were there, watching. It's not safe. They know. McKinley stepped back from the table. If Calder was being watched, who the hell was out there with him? That's what we're going to find out. But Calder disappeared, McKinley said. No records, no sightings, no remains. Not yet, Hayes replied. But we know where he went after the burial. And we know someone was tracking him even then. McKinley paced slowly, the sound of his boots echoing through the empty station. We've been treating Calder like the center of the case. But he wasn't the predator. No, Hayes said. He was prey. A silence settled, dense and suffocating. Hayes kept staring at the map, the circle around the outcrop, the word stop, the force of the ink, the desperation in the handwriting. Stop wasn't the killer's message. It was Calder's last word. The moment he realized he wasn't alone in the woods. The moment he sensed the presence that had been stalking him since the night Lily died. The moment the hunter became the hunted. Hayes pointed to the circle. This is where Calder stopped, where he felt whoever was following him close in. You think he died there? The sheriff asked. Hayes shook his head. No. If he died at the outcrop, the remains would be near Lily's. But he left the forest. He made it to the housing units. He hid the box. He wrote final entries. Then what? Hayes looked toward the window where the night pressed against the glass like a silent observer. That's the part we're missing. The next morning, Hayes returned to the Harlock site, this time with deputies' ground-penetrating radar and a determination sharpened into something almost dangerous. The sun hung low, casting long shadows. Birds circled overhead, but refused to land. The old housing units sat in a mute row. Number 4 waited like a cavity filled with stale breath. Hayes approached it with the caution of someone approaching a grave. The footprint trail remained untouched. The boot lay where he'd placed the evidence markers. Hayes ordered the team to scan beneath the floorboards. The radar swept in slow arcs. Waves of silent data flowed across the monitor. Soil density changes, voids in the earth, hidden anomalies. Sir, a technician said, pointing at the screen, there's something beneath the structure, something large, metal. Hayes's pulse quickened. Metal-buried junk tools. Not tools, she said, bigger. How big? Truck-sized. A coldness stabbed through him. Truck-sized. His mind reeled. That meant one of two things. A second vehicle. Or the same one. But the truck found near the outcrop had been there for decades. This wasn't the same. He crouched beside the technician. Depth, 4 feet down. Shape, rectangular, frame-like. Not natural. Hayes stood abruptly. Start digging, now. The team circled the unit shovels, plunging into the soil in steady rhythm. Dirt piled. Roots broke. Hours passed. Sweat mixed with tension. Finally, a dull clang. The unmistakable sound of metal striking metal. One of the deputies brushed the dirt aside with gloved hands, revealing a curved surface, rusted, corroded, but undeniably man-made. Hayes knelt, brushing away soil until more of the object emerged. A fender. He moved faster, uncovering a grill. Headlights shattered into dust remnants of a bumper. A second truck. Hidden perfectly beneath the housing structure. Buried intentionally shallow enough to remain accessible. Concealed under the one place no one ever thought to search. Get the side clear, Hayes ordered. As soil fell away, a window came into view. Inside, Hayes froze. A skull stared back at him from the driver's seat. Mouth open, jaw fractured, eye sockets hollow. The skeleton sat slumped forward, hands still resting near the wheel. A tattered jacket hung from its shoulders, the fabric mottled by time. Hayes felt the world narrow to a pinpoint. The jacket, the shape of the shoulders, the faint outline of initials barely visible on the breast pocket. B.C. Calder. Brenton Calder had never left the forest. He had never escaped. He had been buried here all along, not under the outcrop, not far from the truck, but under the very structure the company abandoned, a grave hidden beneath a decaying home, a grave no one would ever disturb unless they were looking for it. The deputies backed away, some cursing under their breath, others crossing themselves. The air grew heavy, suffocating, as if the forest had been holding its breath for 20 years and was now exhaling everything it had swallowed. Hayes stared at the remains, feeling the cold reality settle into his bones. Calder didn't kill Lily. He tried to bury the accident, tried to hide the truck, tried to hide the evidence. But someone followed him. Someone hunted him. Someone killed him. And someone buried him in a place only they knew, a place that gave them complete control. A place that kept Calder silent forever. They murdered him, a deputy whispered. Hayes didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was unraveling too quickly, threads snapping one by one. Someone had been there the night Lily died. Someone had tracked Calder. Someone had marked him for death. Someone who knew the Harlock property intimately. Someone who knew the forest. Someone who had a reason to remain invisible. As Hayes studied the skeleton, something caught his eye. A bullet hole in the skull. Small, precise, execution style. He stepped back, breath caught in his throat. The killer hadn't panicked. The killer hadn't improvised. The killer wasn't a drifter, a passerby, a ghost story. The killer was calm, methodical, practiced. and they had erased Calder as neatly as they had erased themselves. Hayes felt the weight of it all settle across his shoulders, an oppressive certainty tightening around his ribs. The case wasn't just about Lily, or Calder. It wasn't even about Redstone. It was about someone who had used the forest as a hunting ground, someone who had buried the truth twice, someone who had lived among them all along. And as Hayes stared at Calder's remains, the forest around him seemed to whisper again, "You're getting close." The excavation site fell silent as the last shovelful of dirt slid from the exposed truck, settling into the pit like the breath of something ancient, finally stirred awake. Hayes stood at the edge, staring down at Calder's remains, slumped behind the wheel, an image so stark, so brutally final, it felt as if the forest itself had dealt the final blow. Deputies murmured behind him in fragmented shock, all of them aware they were witnessing the unearthing of a secret so meticulously hidden that only chance and a detective unwilling to let go had brought it to light. The deeper truth settled across the scene like frost. Calder had not fled, had not vanished, had not chosen silence. Silence had been forced upon him. Hayes descended into the pit with slow, deliberate steps, his boots sinking into loose soil. He approached the driver's side cautiously, not because he feared the dead, but because he feared what their positioning implied. The skeleton leaned slightly forward, one arm drooping toward the floorboard, fingers curled as though frozen in the middle of a final, desperate gesture. A gesture toward something. "Get me more light here," Hayes said quietly. A deputy adjusted portable lamps, their beams flooding the interior with harsh white light. Shadows jumped against the shattered windshield. Hayes leaned in his gaze, drawn to the skeletal hand pointed at the passenger seat. He reached inside, lifted the brittle bones carefully aside, and found what the gesture indicated. A small object, covered in filth, wedged between the seat and the console. He pulled it free, brushing off layers of decay until its shape emerged rectangular plastic with a cracked screen and a corroded battery panel. A pager, an old one, early 2000s model. His heart lurched. Pagers recorded messages, numbers, coded notes, sometimes short text alerts. Many had built-in memory systems. "Get this to the lab," Hayes said, passing it to a deputy, "even if we have to rebuild the circuit board from scratch." Calder had been trying to signal something, or someone. And whatever he tried to say, whatever he attempted to pass on in the seconds before death, it might still be hidden inside that device. Hayes climbed out of the pit, the cold air hitting him like a wave. Sheriff McKinley approached, jaw clenched so tight his teeth nearly ground. "I've seen a lot of things in this job," McKinley muttered, "but this is something else." Hayes nodded, eyes fixed on the open hole. He wasn't running, he was hiding. And someone found him. "You think it was the same person from the night Lily died?" Hayes stared past the sheriff into the line of trees that crept toward the horizon. "It's too clean, Sheriff. Too deliberate. Whoever did this didn't panic. They executed him, buried him under a structure they knew was going to be condemned. And they counted on the forest to swallow the rest." McKinley swallowed hard. "That's not a kid. That's not a hot-headed boyfriend. That's a professional." Hayes didn't reply. Not because he disagreed, but because the truth forming in his mind was even more unsettling. Professionals didn't operate in tiny mountain towns by accident. They didn't appear out of thin air. They didn't kill teenage girls without motive. Whatever had happened in 2001 was not random, and whoever had been in the forest with Calder belonged to Redstone more deeply than anyone had realized. Back at the station, the atmosphere was suffocating. Deputies whispered in corners, phones rang nonstop. The discovery of Calder's body hadn't yet reached the public, but the tension was a constant hum, as if the building itself sensed that something monstrous had been uncovered. Hayes retreated into the evidence room, shutting the door behind him. He needed silence. He needed space. He needed to think. He laid out everything on the table. Lily's recovered fabric, the silver button, the locker key, the map, the notebook, Calder's photograph. Each item seemed to pulse with its own cold energy, each one a living thread that connected to something larger, darker. He picked up the notebook and reread the last legible lines. "I didn't mean for it to happen. She fell. Someone followed me. They know." The words trembled in their faded ink like screams frozen in time. Hayes's breath hitched. Something didn't fit. The way Calder described Lily at the bridge surprised, not terrified. The way he framed it, an accident, not an attack. The way he spoke of someone else being there, someone watching. If Lily slipped, fell, or was injured accidentally, Calder might have panicked, hidden the body, hidden the truck. But then someone else came. Someone else who didn't want the truth of an accident. Someone who benefited from silence. Someone who eliminated Calder because he was a loose end, not a killer. Hayes pressed his palms against the table, trying to steady his thoughts as they spiraled toward a conclusion he didn't want to reach. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of management. Someone had stepped in to manage the aftermath. Someone with control. Someone with experience. Someone who operated in systems. Fear crawled up Hayes' spine like an electric current. Someone who behaved like law enforcement. His pulse thudded, his breathing narrowed. He grabbed the employment file for Harlock Timber, and beside it, the archived personnel files from the sheriff's department, dating back to 1998. He flipped through them with frantic fingers. Deputy transfers, retirements, administrative separations. Most were ordinary, but one file caught his eye. Deputy Marcus Hemsley joined the department in 1997. Left in 2002. No notes, no explanations, no forwarding address. He frowned. Hemsley had been part of the search teams for Lily. He'd patrolled Pine Creek Road. He'd interviewed Lily's coworkers. He'd helped map the initial timeline. And he had been working off-duty jobs with Harlock Timber during slow seasons. The overlap punched through Hayes' chest like a blade. He grabbed the file, flipping through. Performance commendations, field training supervisor, firearms instructor, nothing out of place. But some pages were missing. Someone had removed sections of the file, cleanly, professionally. Hayes slammed the folder shut. A knock shook the door. He turned as a deputy stepped in holding the corroded pager. Detective the tech team managed to extract something. Hayes' skin prickled. What is it? We restored one message. A number came through. It's local. Read it. The deputy swallowed. It's a 7-digit number. Belongs to someone in the sheriff's personnel records from 2001. Hayes' voice dropped. Whose? The deputy hesitated. Deputy Marcus Hemsley. Hayes' throat constricted. Calder tried to page Hemsley. Or Hemsley paged him. A connection. A link hidden in plain sight. What does it mean? The deputy asked. Hayes stared at the pager mind racing. It means Calder wasn't alone that night. It means he tried to contact someone. It means the person he reached out to might have met him before he died. But Hemsley left town years ago, the deputy said. No forwarding, no contact. Exactly, Hayes replied, his voice cold as stone. That's what worries me. He grabbed his coat. Detective, where are you going? To check something, Hayes said. Something we should have checked 20 years ago. The cemetery lay on the edge of town, rows of weathered stones, half buried under layers of fallen pine needles. Hayes moved through the gate, his breath a pale mist in the cold evening air. He scanned the markers until he found the small administrative office locked and dark. He didn't need inside. He walked among the graves, row after row until he reached the section marked 2002. He found it exactly where it shouldn't have been, a stone. Modest, plain, inscribed with a name. Marcus Hemsley, 1980-2002. Gone but not forgotten. Hayes stared at the stone as wind rattled through the trees around him. Something cold twisted in his chest. Gone but not forgotten, he whispered. Except he had been forgotten. Buried quietly, without record, without mention. A deputy in a small town doesn't die without notice. Not without reports, obituaries, funerals, acknowledgments. And yet, Hayes knelt, brushing pine needles away from the base of the marker. The dirt looked too even, too smooth, too recently packed for a grave supposedly untouched for 20 years. He pressed his hand flat against the soil. It was cold, but not cold enough. Not old enough. Son of a... Footsteps behind him. Hayes spun. A figure stood at the edge of the path, half shadowed by the trees. Not approaching, not moving, watching. Hayes' hand instinctively went to his holster. Identify yourself. The figure didn't reply, didn't flinch, didn't breathe visibly. Hayes stepped forward. This is the last warning. Silence. And then the figure turned and walked into the woods, disappearing soundlessly between the trees. Not running, not panicking, just leaving. As if they wanted to be seen. As if they wanted Hayes to know he was being watched. As if the game had shifted. Hayes stood frozen, the wind screaming through branches overhead. The grave behind him. The forest in front of him. The truth closing in from both sides. Marcus Hemsley wasn't dead. He had never been in that grave. And the person who had haunted Redstone for 2 decades, the one who hunted Lily, hunted Calder and now watched Hayes, had just walked deeper into the trees. Still alive, still waiting, still hiding in the one place he had always controlled, the forest. Hayes stood rooted to the cemetery path long after the figure vanished into the forest. His breath, sharp as mind, a tangle of fear and clarity. The grave behind him felt like a cruel joke, a stone marker carved for a man who had never been buried. And the footsteps he'd heard, the unmistakable presence watching him, confirmed the truth he'd been circling around for days. Marcus Hemsley was alive. Alive and moving through the trees with the same predatory quiet he had perfected decades earlier. Alive and still watching anyone who stepped too close to the truth. Alive and carrying knowledge, dark-buried knowledge of that night in 2001 when Lily Harrow never made it home. Hayes clenched his jaw, his heartbeat pounding a relentless warning in his chest. He was no longer chasing a ghost. He was being hunted by a man who had already killed twice. And Marcus Hemsley knew the forest better than anyone in Redstone. Hayes walked quickly back to his car, scanning the tree line every few seconds. The air had shifted no longer cold, but suffocating, as if every pine needle vibrated with tension. His instincts buzzed like static. The figure hadn't run. Hemsley hadn't tried to stay hidden. Instead, he had wanted to be seen. A deliberate apparition. A warning. Not stay away, but I'm still here. Hayes reached the car, slipped behind the wheel, and locked the doors with a solid click. The interior felt too small, too vulnerable. His breath fogged the windshield as he sat there gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. He forced himself to breathe. One steady inhale, one longer exhale. He needed clarity, not panic, not fear. Hemsley wanted him rattled, wanted him off balance, wanted him chasing shadows while the truth remained buried. Hayes drove straight to the sheriff's office. Inside, McKinley was waiting, tension carved into the lines of his face. Deputies paused their conversations when Hayes entered their restless eyes, revealing the strain of the day's discoveries. "You look like hell," McKinley muttered. "I found something." Hayes placed the cemetery coordinates on the table. "There's a grave with Hemsley's name on it." McKinley blinked. "He's buried here." "No," Hayes said sharply. "He's not. Someone made a headstone for him. But I saw him alive, tonight." Silence gripped the room. Deputies stared in wide-eyed disbelief. McKinley finally spoke. "You're sure?" He stepped out of the tree line like he'd been waiting for me, then walked away without saying a word. If it wasn't Hemsley, it was his twin. A deputy swore under his breath. Another whispered, "Jesus." Hayes leaned across the table. "We've been operating under the assumption that Calder either panicked or had a partner. But what if the partner wasn't a panicked teenager? What if it was Hemsley? A trained deputy, someone who knew procedure, knew the search patterns, knew how to hide evidence." McKinley's expression tightened. "You're suggesting a law enforcement officer killed Lily Harrow?" "No," Hayes said, eyes dark. "I'm suggesting someone in law enforcement silenced the person who caused her accidental death and then let the town believe she vanished without a trace." A deep, heavy dread settled into the room. Hayes continued. "Calder's notebook says Lily fell, that she wasn't afraid, that it wasn't supposed to happen, that someone followed him, that they knew." McKinley exhaled shakily. That someone was Hemsley. Hayes nodded. He was there that night. He followed Calder, then executed him and buried him. Whatever happened to Lily wasn't murder, but eliminating Calder. That was intentional. "And Lily?" a deputy asked quietly. Hayes felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "Lily might have survived the fall or the injury. We don't know. Calder said she fell. He never admitted to killing her." McKinley rubbed his temples. Then what was Hemsley protecting? Hayes stared at the table, the pieces clicking together like gears finally finding their teeth. "Not Lily," he whispered. "Not Calder. Himself." A hush fell. Hemsley wasn't protecting the truth, Hayes said. He was protecting his own involvement. Whatever it was. McKinley straightened a voice, trembling slightly. "We need to find him. Tonight." "No," Hayes said, quietly but firmly. "He's already watching us. Hunting him in the forest now is suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" "Pressure," Hayes said. "We force him into the open." Hayes walked to the evidence room again. The objects sat on the table like pieces of someone else's nightmare. The notebook, the map, the pager, the ring, Lily's fabric, Calder's photograph. He studied them with new eyes, tracing the trajectory of the case backward, step by step, stripping away the noise. If Calder and Lily met secretly, why? If Hemsley followed them, how? If Lily fell, where? If Calder buried her in the truck, why didn't he run? The notebook answered most of it. Fear, panic, guilt, the belief he could fix things, the belief he could return later when the storm passed. But the final question burned brightest. Why did Hemsley kill Calder? Hayes replayed the fragments of the notebook. Someone followed me. They know. Know what? Not about Lily's fall. That part had already happened. Not about the truck Calder hit it alone. Then what? Hayes stared at the photograph of Lily and Calder, mountain backdrop, redstone skyline behind them, a railing, a view familiar enough to make his breath hitch, a viewpoint overlooking the river trail, the same trail Hemsley patrolled, the same trail where hikers had reported a deputy talking to a girl weeks before Lily disappeared, an account dismissed as rumor at the time. The same trail that appeared in Lily's sketches taped on her bedroom wall. Hayes felt his heartbeat slow, heavy as thunder. Hemsley didn't follow Calder by accident. He had followed Lily first. Before she met Calder, before the bridge, before the fall, Hayes whispered to himself, he wasn't covering up Calder's accident. He was covering up something he did. The realization hit so hard the table seemed to sway. Hemsley hadn't eliminated a loose end, he'd eliminated a witness. And Lily Bright observant? Lily had seen something she shouldn't have on that trail. Something involving Hemsley. Something he couldn't allow to spread. But what? What could a deputy in a small mountain town be hiding so desperately that he killed twice to bury it? Hayes paced the evidence room, his pulse racing, his mind clawing through possibilities. Then it hit him. It wasn't what Lily saw. It was who she saw him with. He grabbed the personnel files for Harlock Timber employees, again flipping through them with frantic urgency, until he found it. A name, a face, a record. Stephen Kane, Harlock Timber security contractor, arrested in 1999 for assault. Charges dropped suddenly. Last known contact, Marcus Hemsley. Hemsley hadn't been working for Harlock during slow seasons. He'd been working with Kane, quietly, off the books, doing something the company wanted hidden, something dangerous enough to erase records. Hayes' breath trembled. If Lily stumbled upon Hemsley and Kane together during a meeting argument exchange, anything Hemsley would do anything to keep her silent. And Calder? Calder had been with her the night she disappeared. Whether he helped her or panicked afterward didn't matter. Hemsley saw them both as threats. One girl, one witness. One panicked kid who knew too much. Two graves. One killer. Hayes slammed the file shut. This wasn't a case about a missing girl. This was a case about a deputy abusing authority to collaborate with a criminal and murdering anyone who jeopardized that secret. He turned to leave the evidence room and stopped. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then went dark. The room plunged into shadow. A chill crawled up Hayes' arms. The power wasn't out. He heard the hum of lights in the hallway. Someone had cut the switch to the evidence room. Footsteps moved outside. Slow, precise, purposeful. Hayes' hand moved to his holster. Another set of footsteps slid through the corridor like a whisper. Then a voice, quiet but unmistakable, seeped through the darkness. A voice Hayes had never heard in person, yet recognized instantly from the shape of its silence. "Detective Hayes," it murmured. "You should have stopped." Hayes' pulse froze. The voice came again, closer. "You came too far." A shape appeared behind the frosted glass of the evidence room door. Broad shoulders, steady posture. A silhouette outlined in dim hallway light. Marcus Hemsley. Alive, watching, waiting. Hayes stepped back, gun drawn, but breath steady. The door handle twitched. Turned, slow, deliberate. Hayes steadied his aim. And the last thing he heard before the door began to open was Hemsley's calm, almost conversational whisper. "You found the graves. Now let me show you the forest." The door eased open with a soft metallic groan, a sound too gentle for the violence coiled behind it. Hayes kept his stance rigid, firearm raised, breath measured. The silhouette in the doorway shifted, broad shoulders, steady frame posture carved from the same cold confidence that had walked away from a grave 20 years earlier. Marcus Hemsley stepped into the evidence room, closing the door behind him without a sound. He was older now, but not aged. Hard. Controlled. His face carried the weathered lines of a man who had lived in silence, in darkness, in the margins of a life he abandoned voluntarily. His eyes, steady pale, predatory, locked onto Hayes with no flicker of fear, no hesitation, only calculation. A calm predator who had hunted before, a man who had killed twice and lived unnoticed among the trees. Hayes didn't lower his gun. Hemsley raised a hand, slowly, palms empty, as if offering peace. But the gesture didn't fool Hayes for a second. "Detective Hayes," he said, his voice low, even disturbingly steady, "you're a difficult man to convince." Hayes' jaw tightened. "Convince me of what? That you should walk away." A chill slid across the back of Hayes' neck. "People died. I don't walk away from that." Hemsley's eyes flicked to the evidence on the table, the map, the notebook, Calder's photograph. Something in his gaze shifted almost imperceptibly. Not guilt, recognition. "You think you know what happened?" Hemsley murmured. "I know what you did," Hayes snapped. "I know you killed Calder. I know you buried him under the Harlock housing unit. I know you followed Lily that night. And I know you've been watching this case for 20 years. For the first time, Hemsley smiled, a faint, cold arc that held no warmth. "You're half right," he said. Hayes' pulse hammered. "Tell me which half." Hemsley took one slow step closer. Hayes tightened his grip. "That's far enough." Hemsley stopped. His voice stayed calm, too calm. Calder wasn't innocent detective. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't some scared kid who stumbled into something bigger than him. Hayes shook his head sharply. "His notebook says otherwise." "His notebook says what he wanted others to believe," Hemsley replied, "but truth is a weapon. And Calder used it well." Hayes kept his gun trained. "Start talking." Hemsley's eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing how much to reveal. Then, with a long inhale, he began. "Calder didn't stumble across Lily by accident. He followed her for weeks, quietly, after work, after school. He watched her sketch near the river trail. He watched her walk home from the diner. He took that photograph without her permission." Hayes' stomach twisted. "You're lying." "I don't need to lie," Hemsley said, voice steady. "Calder was infatuated with her, obsessively. He made sure she never noticed him, not at first. But she did eventually. And when she confronted him, he panicked." Hayes' grip tightened. His notebook. "Is a confession spun into martyrdom?" Hemsley interrupted. "He wrote what made him feel like the victim. What made the truth easier to swallow." Hayes' mind raced. Could Calder have lied? Could the notebook be misdirection? Hemsley continued. "I found them on the Overlook Trail weeks before she disappeared. She was upset. He was shaking. I intervened. I told him to leave her alone, warned him. But obsession doesn't vanish with warnings. It grows." Hayes stayed silent, letting the words sink in. "On the night Lily disappeared," Hemsley said quietly, "I wasn't following Calder. I was following her. Because she asked me to." Hayes' breath hitched. "Explain." "She trusted me," Hemsley replied. "No arrogance, no pride, just fact. She told me someone had been watching her. She didn't know who, so she asked if I would check on her walk home, make sure she got there safely." Hayes felt the ground shift beneath him. Hemsley continued, "But when I got to the bridge, she wasn't alone." Hayes' blood ran cold. "I saw Calder with her," Hemsley said. "He had stopped her. They were arguing. She tried to walk away. He grabbed her arm. She pulled back. He panicked. She slipped." Hayes inhaled sharply, the words slicing through him. "She hit the rocks," Hemsley said. "Hard, too hard." Silence crushed the room. "She wasn't dead," Hemsley whispered. "Not immediately, but she was hurt." Panicking, Calder froze. Then he dragged her off the road toward the ravine. Hayes' jaw clenched. "He said she fell." "He pushed her," Hemsley corrected. "Not on purpose, but enough. He caused the fall. He caused the fracture. He caused the bleeding." "But you," Hayes' voice cracked. "You killed him." Hemsley's gaze hardened. "Yes, but not then." Hayes' grip on the gun faltered just slightly. "What happened next?" Hayes whispered. Hemsley stepped closer, one step, careful, deliberate. "I confronted him the next day," Hemsley said. "Told him to come forward. Told him to tell the truth. But he refused. And then he confessed everything. How he hid her body, hid the truck, hid the evidence. He thought he could wait it out. Let the forest erase her." Hayes swallowed hard. But the worst part, Hemsley said, was what he said after. He admitted she was still alive when he left her. Hayes' eyes widened. "He didn't stay," Hemsley said, voice colder than winter. "She begged for help, and he ran." The words punched Hayes in the sternum. "He left her to die alone in the dark," Hemsley said, "and then he went home and slept like a child." Hayes' voice shook. Then why bury him? Why hide him? Why not arrest him? Hemsley paused, and for the first time, something cracked in his voice. Something fragile. Because no one would believe me, he said. Not without evidence, not without proof. And Calder destroyed it. He burned his clothes, dumped the tarp, scrubbed the truck, lied to my face. Hayes stared at him, the narrative twisting in directions he hadn't anticipated. So you killed him, Hayes said. Yes, Hemsley replied. Because he deserved justice for what he did to her. Justice, Hayes snapped. Justice is not execution. Hemsley didn't flinch. Justice is ensuring predators never harm anyone again. Hayes's voice dropped. You're not a judge. You're not a jury. I was the only one who knew the truth, Hemsley said. And I carried it alone. Hayes shook his head. You buried him. You staged a grave. You pretended to disappear. I had to, Hemsley whispered. If I stayed, they'd think I killed her too, which I didn't. I tried to save her. I was too late. Hayes's throat tightened. Silence flooded the room. For a moment, neither man breathed. Then Hayes saw it. The shift? The tightening in Hemsley's jaw, the faint tremor in his fingers, the way his gaze drifted not to the evidence of Calder, but to the photograph of Lily. A softness there, obsession, possession, longing, delusion. All at once, cold understanding swept through Hayes like a blade of ice. Hemsley wasn't telling the truth. Not all of it. Not the important parts. There was something darker behind his eyes. Something unhinged. Something wrong. Something that twisted the truth into a shape that suited him. Hayes tightened his grip on his weapon. Tell me the rest, Hayes said, voice low. There is no rest, Hemsley replied. Yes, Hayes whispered. There is. There's something missing. Hemsley's gaze sharpened. And for the first time, a flicker of hostility broke through his calm. You don't understand, Hemsley murmured. You never will. Lily wasn't afraid of me. She trusted me. She needed me. Hayes' stomach dropped. You were following her, Hayes said, voice barely audible. Long before Calder. A single muscle twitched in Hemsley's cheek. You watched her sketch on the trail, Hayes continued. You monitored her walk home. You inserted yourself into her life. You made her think she needed protection. Hemsley's eyes went dead. You weren't protecting her, Hayes said. You were grooming her. Hemsley's jaw clenched with a crack. You saw Calder with her that night, and you snapped. Stop, Hemsley hissed. You killed them both, Hayes whispered. Hemsley took a step forward, eyes blazing now, mask cracking. Shut up! Hayes didn't move, didn't blink. You were obsessed with her. You followed her. You wanted control. Hemsley's hand twitched toward his belt. Hayes raised his gun instantly. Don't, Hayes warned. Hemsley's breathing turned ragged. You don't know what she was like, he snarled. You don't know what she meant. She was special. She was a 17-year-old girl, Hayes said. And you were a predator. Something inside Hemsley broke. The quiet shattered. The mask fell. And the killer who stalked Redstone for 20 years finally stepped into the light. You're done, Hayes said. It ends tonight. Hemsley lifted his head slowly, and a horrifying calm washed back over his features. No, detective, he whispered. Tonight is when it begins. Before Hayes could react, Hemsley lunged not at Hayes, but at the evidence room lights. The switch slammed down. Darkness swallowed everything. A hand grabbed Hayes from behind. A blow struck the side of his skull, and the floor rushed up to meet him as the world dissolved into black.